Hello everyone, welcome in today's video. In today's video we'll be doing an in-depth scale on Tokita Ohma, also known as the protagonist of Kengan Ashura. This video will be like my How Strong is Gari video as I look at every aspect of Kengan Ashura to scale Ohma Tokita. When looking at Kengan Ashura, it's important to notice that Kengan Ashura is the prequel to Kengan Omega, meaning we will not be using any content from Kengan Omega. However, the Kengan Ashura is currently limited in the anime style on Netflix, meaning that most of the content in this video will be that from the manga. So beware of spoilers ahead to people who have only seen the anime. In this city, there was a boy. The boy had no name. 12 years ago, he was a baby abandoned in the Tokita ward. Since then, the boy has lived all alone to this day. He did everything from robbery to extortion. As far as the boy was concerned, violence meant life and conflict meant survival. And as you just heard, Ohma as a child was very much not the average child, even at the age of just 12. In fact, the first time we see Ohma doing something as a child, he is robbing from the entire Yakuza mob. When he does this robbery, he goes back to his hideout and leaves the entire mob there, for which then the gangster leader gets all of his soldiers, who are considered professional criminals, to attack Ohma. Despite the fact that Ohma was started off sat down when they already started charging at him, Ohma swiftly defeats all of them using 2 knives within only a single page. After that, the mobster himself has to go deal with Ohma, and he does considerable damage, punching with a force so strong that it's stated that his normal punches can shatter concrete fences. Despite that, and beating on Ohma for a long time to the point where the mobster's hand was bleeding, Ohma does not give up in the slightest, and he gets so angry that he ends up pushing the mobster out of the window, falling down to his death, and with no fear, Ohma not only wins the battle, he also straight up says, "So, you guys want to fight too?" Let's start off with Ohma's greatest strength when he was a child, and that was his resilience or his durability. We'll use the fact that the mobster was able to hit with his killer karate punch, which is stated strong enough to pulverize concrete. If we use something like a concrete brick losing its volume, we'd say that pulverizing a concrete brick would be 55,900 joules, which is wall level. However, if you read the scan more closely, it is not just pulverizing a brick, but an entire concrete fence. An entire concrete fence is much larger and looks something a little bit like this. Using its much larger dimensions and much larger volume, we get a much higher pulverization energy for the concrete fence at 593,000 joules. However, that is just for a single panel of the concrete fence. The actual concrete fence has at least 4 panels reaching 2.3 million joules, still wall level. But for a comparison's sake, the punches that Ohma was withstanding when he was a child were so strong that they are 145 times stronger than the strongest character in the Rocky franchise, Ivan Drago, and Ohma withstood these punches for so long, the one doing the punches actually got himself a bleeding hand. Now for Ohma's attack potency. His attack potency isn't as good as his durability, but it's still quite good. Let's start off with the feat of him pushing the mobster, also known as Androjuro, out of the window a very far distance, along with himself at the same time. Now Ohma is stated to be 12 to 13 years old. We'll use 12 to make it a lower end estimation, and if so, that makes Ohma 1.49 meters tall. Compare that to Androjuro and where Ohma is placed on him, we can say Androjuro is an absolute massive 7 foot 2 inches. At his muscular build as well, at that height, he should weigh 120 kilos, which is actually about 3 times more than Ohma himself, being about the average 12-year-old at about 40 kilos. This makes a total weight of 160 kilos. We then compare Androjuro's height to how far Ohma pushed him out the window, and find that he was pushed 3.9 meters. Using a real-time manga time frame of 0.4 seconds based on the shocking dialogue of 5 exclamation marks, we get a speed of the pushing at nearly 22 miles an hour or nearly 10 meters per second. This gives the kinetic energy of Ohma's push to be 7,627 joules. As said a moment ago, while pushing someone 3 times his weight, Ohma was almost able to reach 22 miles an hour. However, this is when pushing someone heavier than him, and thus you would say that Ohma without pushing anything should be even faster. When the mobsters first ran at Ohma, they were running at top speed and Ohma was sitting cross-legged. He then was able to 1. Get up from his cross-legged position, 2. Pull out both his knives, and 3. Split both of the people trying to attack him, and in fact every other person afterwards. This implies he very likely is able to do 3 actions before they can even do 1 action. If we say the average reaction time is something like 0.25 seconds, Ohma's reaction time is likely 0.083 seconds. Now, if we were to go for a theoretical maximum speed, let's discount the weight of the mobster he was pushing, we would say that Ohma's maximum speed should be something more about 19.44 meters per second, which is a superhuman level of speed. Now for Ohma's skill. His skill is not very demonstrated considering he only fights for a few panels here. However, considering in only 1 page he defeats every single mobster who's stated to be a professional criminal, and the greatest mobster who's a killer karate practitioner, notes that he must have gone through an insane number of battles to be able to get this natural instinct, Ohma should be considered highly skilled. However, as the mobster also states, the killer martial art practitioner is at a higher level of skill than Ohma. Ohma does overwhelm him though with his pure tenacity, but that's tenacity, not skill. In conclusion, Ohma as a kid should have an attack potency of street level, a durability of wall level, a speed that is superhuman, and the skill to be untouchable by professional criminals, but still no match for a killer karate practitioner. Now let's move on to Ohma as an adult. As an adult, Ohma has got official stats to tell exactly how tall and heavy he is. He is 1.82 meters tall, which is about 6 foot. Also, his weight is 85 kilograms, or 187 pounds. However, in terms of determining his stats, for strength, attack potency, and speed, we'll have to determine those throughout the series as Ohma progresses throughout the series. Ohma's first fight in the entire series was against someone who was known as the Devia King. The Devia King was over 190 centimeters tall at an absolute giant. It was so muscular you could see all his muscles throughout his shirt. Even his hands were comparable to that of boulders. Despite his big muscular build, this absolute giant is able to move way too fast, in the words of Kazuya Yamashita, and not just that, he's able to kick into a concrete wall. Yet by the end of this fight, Ohma was able to beat the Devia King so badly it mirrored that of Garou beating Darkshine. However, I would argue this is even worse, because Darkshine didn't look like this by the end of the fight. Now let's calculate the attack potency of that wall concrete breaking kick that I had mentioned just a moment ago. Based on his height, which is 1.92 meters, we can get the crack diameter to be a massive 3.19 meters. Then we can calculate its leg thickness, and from the leg thickness get the crack depth. The crack depth being a mere 0.08355 meters. This gives us a volume of the crack to be 0.669 meters cubed, and based on the fragmentation of concrete, we can say that the energy of this is about 4 million joules or wall level. But for a comparison's sake, this is about twice the energy of the mobster's attack back when Ohma was a child. To show this scales to Ohma's attack potency, we can look at a better fighter than that of the Devia Giant, that being Lehito. Lehito boasts a better win-loss ratio compared to the Giant, where the Giant had 4 wins, 0 losses, Lehito had 5 wins and 0 losses. But not just that, Lehito is praised as an incredibly high-level striker, in the words of Nogi, one of the Kengan Association's most noticeable members. And then in that same statement, Nogi even says that Ohma is so obviously clearly better than that. So Ohma should very clearly scale to this much higher level of power. Another demonstration of Ohma's strength, or in this case lifting strength, is actually something that happened off screen and off panel. And that was Ohma somehow killed this massive boar and dragged it all the way into his rundown apartment. Now, this boar is absolutely gigantic. Compared to the height of Kazuya Yamashita, the boar is
1.957 meters tall. That's much bigger than any conventional boar, where boars normally range from 0.76 to 0.91 meters tall. And their weights range from 68 kilograms to 100 kilograms. This gives us about two different models for how much the boar should weigh, with the first model using the lower end estimation of the boar being that of 1,365 kilograms. The second model using the higher end weights of the boar being 994 kilograms. So overall, we can say that Ohma killed and dragged in a probably 1-ton boar into his house off screen very easily. Now for the start of the speed scaling, I'll be using Ohma's fight with the Medicine Man. For the people who have only seen Kengan Ashura's anime, you will not know who the Medicine Man is, because he is cut out from the anime when he only exists in the manga. In fact, just for people who are wondering, 30% of the content in the manga is cut from the anime. Now going back into the feat, Medicine Man in his fight with Ohma is able to flick his own teeth at such a fast speed that they can embed themselves into concrete, and even cools them like bullets. To verify their speed, we'll be working backwards from their attack potency into the concrete to then verify that it must be going at a certain speed. So first we calculate the tooth's volume, its mass, the hole's volume, its mass, how much it needs to pulverize the concrete, and then finally, after doing all that lengthy work, we can say the speed of these tooth were launched at 99.38 meters per second. And then we can look at Ohma when he blitzes several of them to be about 140 meters per second. Now, having a starting speed that is over 300 miles an hour, or subsonic, is still quite impressive for Ohma. But what's more impressive is the fact that he's able to do these reaction speeds at over 300 miles an hour, despite the fact that he has impaired hearing from an attack called the mosquito that affects the younger hearing range of younger people, that stops him being able to hear properly, as well as impaired vision with his eyes being completely bloodshot from a strike to the eyes, as well as the fact that the strike to the eyes was also inflicted using poison, so that his eyes are both bloodshot and extrally bloodshot for being poisoned, as well as the fact that he's reacting from sound, despite the fact that there is an entire crowd giving a lot of background noise to try and make it even harder for Ohma to concentrate. So him going at 300 miles an hour, despite the fact that he very clearly is all he's going against him, is still very impressive. But it also means a base Ohma would likely be much faster. Now let's take a break from talking about Ohma's strength and speed to talk about his techniques and level of skill. I mean, just his martial art, the Niko style, has so many techniques that a full list of them looks something like this, which is probably unreadable. So let's start off with the skills that we mentioned Ohma could use a second ago, where despite having poisoned vision and it being completely impaired, as well as having loads of distractions from background noise of an entire crowd and impaired hearing from mosquito attack, Ohma is still able to isolate someone's hearing to such a degree that you can hear someone's heart rate and breathing within all this background noise. That is an incredible feat of skill right there. Now, going more into details about fighting skill, we can look at what is considered the standard for the Kengan Association, in which the ultimate fight, which is meant to be the greatest fighting sport in the world in the Kenganverse, equivalent to probably modern day's MMA, has 217 fighters who fight an average of 1.6 matches a year. And this is meant to be the top level fighters that are known to the public. Compare that to the Kengan Association, which instead of having 217 has 1,285 registered fighters, and each one of them will fight as much as 8.5 times a year, which is almost 5 times more often. You sort of get an idea of just how much more intense the Kengan Association is. It's even directly stated that the Kengan fighters would fight back-to-back conflicts one after another, as well as the fact that the fighters chosen by the Kengan Association are the elites among the elites, far beyond that of just an MMA organization. Despite this, and hearing all of that, Ohma is confident that he would crush absolutely everyone in the Kengan Association. Which may sound like a very boastful and arrogant claim in the words of Akiyama in the same scan. However, if you remember, Lihito has been called an incredibly high-ranked fighter in terms of striking with a specialty for balance in both offense and defense. And yet, despite that, there is a clear disparity between that of Ohma and Lahito that would show Ohma clearly winning, and this is without using any of his Niko style techniques. When it comes to Ohma's actual techniques and not just his raw talent and ability, we would look at his usage of the Niko style, which so far in the series he's only even used 2 of the techniques which are on this huge list. Both of them are part of the redirection kata. The redirection kata is a form of seeing and manipulating the flow of power within someone's body, using then minimal motions to manipulate and disrupt their power so that you can delicately control their body. The one that was used against Lahito is called the Weeping Willow, and is literally known as the most basic move in the redirection kata, allowing Ohma to use someone's own power as a way of manipulating and redirecting themselves. When this was used against Lahito, Lahito was shown to be completely powerless despite, remember, being an incredibly high level striker, and being unable to touch Ohma at all anymore, and in fact was looking humiliated and moaned at by his boss. Even the Kengan Association members who have seen tons and tons of fights, as said before, we know each Kengan fighter would have something like 8.5 fights a year. These Kengan Association members who would have seen all the fights had absolutely no clue of what was going on, despite this being the most basic of all of the redirection kata's abilities, showing just how skillful this ability is that bystanders who are great analysts have no idea what's going on. The second Niko-style redirection kata technique that Ohma has used so far in the series is one that's called Entanglement, which is a much more deadly ability, as this one doesn't just redirect the power nowhere to make sure they can't do anything, you redirect their power back into their body as they are doing an attack, using their own momentums to effectively dislocate their own joints in a single sweet action. One last ability that Ohma seems to have is that, despite being behind 2 people who didn't even know he was there, he had such an intimidating aura that not only did they drop their weapons, both of them seemingly wet themselves instantaneously. Now for Ohma's first real opponent, and by real opponent I mean an opponent that is a much higher level. This guy is known as Jun Sakabayashi, a guy capable of throwing Ohma so hard he shatters the concrete floor. Just stepping on the floor is able to shatter it, and he literally considers someone like Lahito a Saturday morning blunder boy, an absolute chump compared to himself. Which is fair to say, Lahito had a 5-win 0-loss record, but Jun Sakabayashi, Hell's Angel, has a record of 50 wins straight with no losses. In fact, later on in the series, his 57 win streak is considered making him the top 5 of the heavyweight fighters in the verse. And in this fight against Ohma, he does so much better, he not only knocks him out, he does this. Now, if we want to work out how strong Ohma is while unconscious, because that's how Ohma is when he repeatedly takes these hits from Jun Sakabayashi, we just need to calculate the crater's depth, the height of Ohma, the diameter of the depth, etc. And in the end, we get once again another wall level feat of 3 million joules. A much more impressive feat is actually right here, where Jun Sakabayashi kicks Ohma into a car. Of course, the anime one doesn't look so impressive, he just dents the front of the car. However, in the manga, not only does Jun Sakabayashi kick him a lot further, to the point where you can barely see Ohma in the distance, but the actual car is just left in smoke and disappeared. The entire car is gone. I'll use a classical way and just say that a car has been destroyed, for which Versus Battle Wiki has a very good in-depth calculation for that. So here's their calculation. It ends up with 48 million joules, which is now reaching small building level. We do also have an interesting adaptation of the Weeping Willow technique of Ohma redirecting someone's power. In this example here, Jun Sakabayashi grabs Ohma, but because he's touching Ohma, Ohma is able to redirect his own grab to basically toss around Jun Sakabayashi. Now, if you're as confused as Jun Sakabayachi is right here, wondering what Ohma means by alone, or as it's better known as in the manga, the Advance, or its absolutely best name, the God of Possession, it's called, allow me to explain. This ability is the secret ultimate technique of the Niko style, and what it does is it allows the user to basically power up to what is known to be the power they desire. How this is done is explained by the Doctor, effectively being the power that comes from the heart. Ohma is effectively overcharging his heart like a machine to go much faster to increase his metabolic rate so that he can act faster in a fight. However, in doing so, he is causing a major strain on his body and his heart, which can cause problems such as audio and visual hallucinations, memory loss, and several other issues with his blood vessels, which actually affect Ohma throughout the series. Despite this, and being at a heart rate that would probably give most people a heart attack, Ohma is able to maintain this throughout entire fights and use it to bolster his strength to an extreme level, being able to even overcome someone like Jun Sakabayachi, who just moments ago was completely unfazed by most of Ohma's attacks. Now, if we want to find how much more powerful and how much faster Ohma got using Advance against Jun Sakabayachi, we can use the analogy said by the Wild Tiger, in which, when talking about how Ohma has gotten faster and therefore stronger, he uses an analogy that like Ohma's base strength would be like 30 kilometers an hour and then the full one would be 50. If we use that analogy, we can then estimate Ohma's increase, in which we can say his speed has gone up by 1.66 times faster. However, because power is not linear, even shown in the analogy, we would say that power is actually more like 2.78 times more powerful. And I'll show this in two different mathematical ways for those who are interested. One last comment about the Advance. The stronger level Advance Ohma uses, the redder and more devilish his body is. So just note that this multiplier and speed increase is purely for the lowest level of Advance. With the Advance active, Ohma is able to perform much faster speed feats like this one right here, where Ohma is able to move literally between frames faster than anyone can see and literally as a blur, and he's so fast that he's able to knock out Jun Sakabayachi in only one punch. The speed of this to move so fast as a blur between here and the distances acquired will be calculated right here, in which we get a speed of 317 meters per second, which is very close to the speed of sound. However, Ohma actually does it even faster in the manga when he jumps off Jun Sakabayachi's back. See, in the manga version, he does so fast that we don't even see Ohma move, it's just a whoosh and he's gone. The fact that once again we can't see him means we have a time frame faster than the human eye can see, and then based on the distance of which Ohma must have travelled, we could say that Ohma's speed here is over 500 meters per second, which is getting close to double the speed of sound. After the fight with Jun Sakabayachi, there is an interesting resistance-based feat that happens straight afterwards. After the fight, the head of a corporate bank known as Metaro Katahara, who is also the head of the Kengan Association, shows up. When telling Nogi he has earned the right to compete against him, Akiyama, Nogi's assistant, is so terrified of Metaro Katahara that she compares him to an erupting volcano and can't even move an inch. The same Akiyama who has seen all of Ohma's fights and tons of other Kengan fights previously in the series. However, when this is said, Ohma himself shows up and he has got an extremely bored expression, basically showing that someone who has much greater fear hacks than even Ohma himself, to the point where they're a natural disaster by comparison, cannot scare Ohma, just bores him. A quick side note, just to compare Ohma against normal people, we have a bunch of gangsters pulling up at Kazuo Yamashita's house, 100 of them in fact, and they're led by one gangster who's armed and looks like Discount Josuke. And what happens is well, they fight Ohma, we don't see the fight, but we do see the before where they're all roaring, and the after where they must have the biggest hospital bill in their life. And afterwards it was even stated that Ohma not only beat them all, he beat them all without even breaking a sweat. Now, after Ohma does some time recovering from the injuries he had in his previous fights, as well as doing some training to get a bit stronger, they then have the start of the Kengan Annihilation Tournament, for which now I should say the standards for most fighters in there, or at least the standards for base Ohma to overcome at the very start of the tournament. In this tournament, there will be 151 different fighters entered. 28 of them are automatically put through because they're meant to be high-ranking fighters from high-ranking companies, leaving 123 that still have to fight, and only the best 5 of them get to enter the tournament. Ohma should be able to scale to most of these fighters, as they seem to be the bottom of the barrel for the tournament. The ones that we'll be using particularly will be Jerry Tyson, Hassad, and Akaru. Starting off with Ohma scaling to Jerry Tyson, we have a skill improvement. As previously, Jerry Tyson was known as someone who was very talented, and he learned all sorts of animal mimicry skills. But after becoming talented and knowing all the animal mimicry skills, he then realized that actually learning from mimicking animals may not be the best style, as animals lose to humanoid weapons. So then he adapted his style so that he instead mimics weapons itself, effectively creating a brand new style which is greater than all the animal mimicry styles and is literally built on the things that kill animals. When facing Ohma in the preliminary, Ohma defeats him practically in one hit using the adamantine style of the Niko style. And while this is a brand new style of the Niko style, it is actually the worst area of the Niko style for Ohma. So using the worst area of the Niko style, he effectively one-shots someone who is above all animal mimicry styles. Now, the adamantine style of the Niko style, or especially this technique Indestructible, is very simple to explain, and I think the anime does a very good job, so let's just have the anime explain it for me.
I'll explain it to you scientifically. Question. 20 pounds of tofu and 20 pounds of iron. If they hit you at the same speed, which one will hurt more? I'll kill you! Listen, what I'm trying to say is that the harder one will hurt more. Understand? Now, watch closely for the moment of impact. Tighten the muscles. Well, amazing, right? By stiffening the muscles in your entire body in one instant, you can slam things with a body as hard as steel. It's the essential ability of the adamantine form of the Niko style, Indestructible.
Now, the next fighter we're going to bring up, who is in the preliminaries with Ohma, would be Hassad. Hassad is someone who can move so fast that he can both have 4 different arms on each side, showing that he's speed of 4 times someone's human's perception at 480 meters per second, or he can show an identical feat of beating 4 people at the same time, 1 hit each, and doing all of this faster than anyone could even see him draw his arms out, again at 480 meters per second. This is very close to the 500 meters per second that Ohma was showing in his advance previously. However, Ohma massively upscales this character for simply entering the Kengan Annihilation tournament. The reason being is Hassad got humiliated by one of the bodyguards getting blitzed and 2-shot off the boat when he tried to rebel against Metsuo Katahara, in which then Metsuo Katahara then said that no one in the tournament would dare have such a humiliating defeat. Therefore, base Ohma would upscale this speed and likely is faster than his advance against Jun Sekibayashi previously. Now, this third fighter, Karu, doesn't quite fit the standard of the last two. While I did say that these are more like the standard stats for people in the tournament, Karu is among the stronger people within the tournament. In fact, he's probably in the top 50% out of the 32 competitors. So understand when I say Ohma scales to him, I'm not saying that all characters scale to him, but base Ohma should. Looking at how strong Karu is, we can look at something like him choking out a great white shark underwater, or more impressively, when he fought this absolutely gigantic whale and apparently defeats it in a single harpoon strike, in which the harpoon strike is actually just a form of punch he does against Sop Pang. What makes this really impressive is that whale is so large that a calculation done by character stats and profile puts its energy at 8.8 billion joules or 2.1 tons of TNT, which is just enough to be building level. For further reference for why this whale is so big, the average blue whale would be something like 200 tons, while this absolutely gigantic whale is more like 6,000 tons according to this calculation on character stats and profile. The reason why Ohma scales to this level is the fact that both Karu and Aaron Dudley are stated to have the same type of strength in their core muscles and within their back muscles. And yet when Ohma does image training against Adam Dudley, he does mention that these core muscles are too strong to simply redirect on the fly. However, he does swiftly knock him out with a single punch to the jaw with an iron breaker, showing that he can knock out someone with building level strength in a single punch using Iron Breaker. Iron Breaker is a more advanced version of the Adamantine style that was used against Jerry earlier. However, the fact it's still a knockout and Ohma does it in base shows that he should scale to this level. Now this is quite a large jump, going from a few million joules all the way up to a few billion joules. So because of such, we should look at another feat for consistency for Ohma to be on this level. Now when Ohma's trying to get stronger, punching a rock and causing minimal damage, but somehow causing vapor to come out of it, won't question that, he then gets a little vision and pep talk from Niko, and then afterwards hits the rock much harder, completely shattering it. Not only does he completely shattering it, but he's also able to cause a large dent in it, for which there are no pebbles underneath, implying pulverization. We'll need to calculate both of this. First we'll look at Ohma's height of the rock, radius of the rock, get a volume for fragmentation of the rock. Then we can start looking at what was pulverized, looking at the diameter of the hole, using another angle to get the depth of how much Ohma punched into it, to get the volume of how much was pulverized. However, then we need to take away this volume that was pulverized from how much was fragmented so that we don't have any double counting. Finally, we say how much energy it is for fragmenting rock and pulverizing rock to finally get the energy of 3.8 billion joules or 0.9 tons of TNT. Another way of showing that Ohma should be more powerful, or at least powerful enough to kill that 6,000 metric ton giant whale, is what we can do is we can use Ohma's first fight within the Kengan tournament. In fact, Ohma doesn't just beat it, he massively surpassed this level. In the first fight in the Kengan tournament, Ohma fights Inaba, someone who uses his hair to be able to grapple and whip around Ohma. It is stated in the verse that the strength of the hair on the human body can go up to 15 tons of force. However, that is for just being able to pull out the hair, ripping it. However, what Ohma does is just by going into his advance, causes a massive explosion, completely obliterating Inaba's hair. And Inaba's hair is not just normal hair either, it's literally stated to be like a steel wire. So this means we'll use a different range using the maximum for the strength of hair at 260 megapascals, or the minimum tensile strength of mild steel at 345 megapascals. If we want to convert these into tons of force, we have to find out how much the area of Inaba's hair is, which is very difficult because it's very long, and I'm not going to try and calculate how many strands of hair Inaba also has, considering he has a lot of them. So if we just say that it's at least 1 square meter of area, we can say that the braking force needed for obliterating Inaba's hair, like Ohma does here, is between 260,000 to 345,000 metric tons, which is 43 to 57.5 times more powerful than the massive whale. Unfortunately, we cannot apply this multiplier straight to the whale feat, because if we did so, that would be a form of calc stacking. However, there is more information we can get from this fight, in particular, Ohma's speed. After Ohma goes into his advance and starts attacking Inaba, it's straight up stated that both Inaba and Ohma were at completely different speeds, implying that Ohma's on a different level of speed compared to Inaba, despite them being relatively close in speed earlier. In fact, it's so bad that when he rushes at Inaba, he completely disappears from Inaba's view. By comparing Ohma's height to how far he must have blitzed Inaba's view by, and then using the time frame of 480 meters per second perception, based on, if you remember, Hassad, who wasn't even good enough to enter the Kengan Annihilation tournament, we get a speed of this Ohma being at 1,800 meters per second, or 5.3 times the speed of sound, or hypersonic speed. Even still, we're only talking about a lesser version of Ohma's advance. We're still not going to the later version which Ohma would employ against Ryan Curie. Ryan Curie is the naturally fastest and strongest person in the Kengan Annihilation tournament. I'll explain that in just a moment. When going against Ryan and using the advance, Ohma is gradually getting faster and stronger as the advance is drawing off his desire. Because of such, when we look at the start of it, we can actually tell very early on how much Ohma is getting faster, with the first thing that happens is Ryan noticing a difference in how it was against Inaba, and then when Ohma just first hits him, he immediately says it was twice of what it was before. And then after that, Ohma has a quick exchange with Ryan before saying Ryan was slow and proceeding to do it again, with Ryan saying he got faster again. With that, we can say another doubling of speed. If we were to compare this then with Inaba's one, where we said he was going at Mach 5.3, the first doubling, which was the base speed used against Ryan, would be at 10.6, and the second doubling would then be at 21.2. Even still, this is not the peak speed of Ryan's base or of what Ohma's advance had reached in this fight.
Now, for the feat that is directly the best speed feat in Kengan Ashura. Now, all we got to do is scale Ray's height to how far he started, to how far he ended, get a total distance of 15.25 meters. We'll then use the time frame we established before with Hassad, which is 1/480th of a second, to get a speed of 7,321 meters per second, or hypersonic plus. However, that is assuming that we only blitz the perception of someone who is at the bottom tier of the Kengan Annihilation Tournament. We actually know it's even faster, and that is because we get this quotation in the manga saying the time frame of the fight was immeasurable. Which is interesting because we have one of the managers of Akuya as well as the doctor both being able to measure things to happen in a millisecond, meaning this actually had to have happened faster than a millisecond. If it happened faster than a millisecond, the actual speed is about twice as much, at 15,252 meters per second, or high hypersonic. Then of course we later have in the manga straight after this fight, Ryan pulls up to Ray, and when he does so, he straight up mocks the speed and the idea of the lightning god, saying it is absolutely nonsense. And even doing so, Ray says that Ryan is such an opponent that he cannot hold back, and that he would be forced to kill him to go all out. In other words, he would have to go much faster than what we just calculated. He then attempts the exact same move on Ryan, in which Ryan easily catches it in base, and not only that, Ryan says it is no faster than a fly. Ray then thinks that Ryan is going all out just for Ryan to say that he isn't, and he would be willing to showing his full power. In other words, a bloodlust stage ready to kill Ray, going as fast as he can, is slower than Ryan holding back because he still isn't at full power. Now we can look at Ryan and therefore Ohma's top speed, as the two are relative to each other. Ryan and Ray should both be at 15,252 meters per second from the scaling just mentioned. However, Ryan's full power is much greater, because normally he's only at 30%. To be 100%, he needs to turn purple and use his removal ability, which puts him all the way up to 100% capacity. Doing so, we can say that Ryan with his removal and Ohma with his full advance should be at 50,842 meters per second, or massively hypersonic. Now for the most direct power feat we see within the series. A common misconception of this feat, mainly because of what the anime showed, is that the punch itself shook more than just the stadium that they are in. We can see this more clearly in the manga, where all the birds and all the trees are all flying away and the trees are shown vibrating. This means that they shook the stadium, the forest, and everything around it. The forest extends the majority of the island, meaning we can say that these punch between Julius and Wakatsuki actually shook the entire island. So let's scale how big that is. Starting off with how big the stadium is, we can look at the bottom floor of the stadium at approximately a story, 4.5 meters, to get the building's height of 42.95 meters. Compare the stadium's height to the mountain, because the mountain is a large part of the island. We can say the mountain is 967 meters tall and just over a kilometer wide. It gives a total volume of the mountain at 333 million cubic meters. Now let's look at the island. The island is not very high, being only 60 meters above sea level, but it is very long and wide, with a length of over 2 kilometers and a width over 2.8 kilometers.
The island's volume is a little bit less than the mountain's volume, but still very large at 180 million cubic meters. This gives a total volume above the ground, since we'll assume that they only shook what's above ground and not what's underground. The total volume above ground is 516 million cubic meters. Average rock density is 2,750 kilograms per cubic meter. This makes the mass of what was shaken, at least what's above ground, at 1.4 trillion kilograms. Assume it was shaking at 1 meters per second, we can say that the energy needed to shake this island is 709 billion joules, or multi-city block. Shaking an island at multi-city blocks, quite a low end. Now let's ask the question, who is stronger between Ryan Kure and the wild tiger Wakatsuki? The reason why we ask this question is quite simply because Ryan is stated in the eyes of Wakatsuki himself, the wild tiger, he thinks Ryan is stronger. The head of the Kengan Association, Metsuo Katahara, he says that the Kuroi clan's natural talent, because of all their different genetics, should be surpassing everybody besides Wakatsuki, implying the wild tiger Wakatsuki is stronger than Ryan. When Ohma fights Wakatsuki, he says that the blows from Wakatsuki are heavier than the blows he had from Ryan. So what's going on? Who is stronger, and why is there so much confusion between the different statements? Okay, so if we use this scale that was used by Ohma to build a numerical scale, where he said that using his adamantine style, his strength is about a 10, while Wakatsuki's strength is more like a 50, we can now look at trying to place Ryan on this scale to try and see how he compares. How we do this is first looking at Ohma's first advance against him, where Ryan himself states Ohma has doubled in strength and speed. Doing so, we can say the first level advance that Ohma used against Ryan would be a 20. However, moments later, he does it again, in the words of Ryan. So with the boost happening again, that's another 2 times. So we can say the second level advance is about a 40 on this scale. Then, as Ohma is getting slightly better, he starts matching base Ryan, meaning base Ryan is likely a little bit over 40 on this scale. This means that base Ryan is weaker than Wakatsuki. However, as we all know, the removal gets Ryan's 30% power and brings it up to 100%. So if we were to do 40 divided by 0.3, which is equivalent to reverse engineering 30% to 100%, we get removal Ryan to be a 133. We also have Ohma with his full advance also being 133 for being equal to Ryan with his removal. Now some of you may bring up the fact that Wakatsuki can kick 3 times harder than he can punch, so that'll be 150 on this scale. However, that just means that anyone who can kick, which would be 3 times harder, would get 3 times more. For example, Ryan would be a 400 on this scale if he was to simply kick. So now, if we want to find Ohma's max attack potency, we can use this scale. Because if you remember, Wakatsuki at 50 is 709 billion joules, meaning Ohma at a 10 with his adamantine style should be at 142 billion joules, which is city block. We also then have Ohma's full advance at a 133 on the scale, or 1.89 trillion joules, or multi-city block.
Now, just for some consistency for the attack potency we gave Ohma here, we can look at the end of the fight with Wakatsuki, where afterwards Wakatsuki was nearly defeated but was very exhausted. And to be able to get this higher scaling, we just have to look at the fact that at the end of the fight, Ohma was able to hit him 4 times, shaking the arena. We even see dust flying from outside the arena, showing that he was able to do this. We also know that if Ohma's punching here, he's unable to use Iron Breaker properly, because at the start of the fight, Wakatsuki destroyed his arms essentially. Meaning this is a weakened Ohma being able to shake the arena, meaning shaking the arena is not very impressive. This is also consistent with a lesser character known as Sorpang, who when he got excited screamed so loud he was also able to shake the arena, and in fact on character stats and profile this was calculated to 51 tons of TNT, which is still in the city block range of the power which Ohma scales to. With the conclusion of scaling up to where Ryan is, at least where his removal is, that means we can now compare how much stronger Ohma got from the start of the Kengan tournament to the end of it. Prior to the Kengan tournament, Ohma's base power was approximately wall level with a speed of Mach 0.4. And then with his advance active against Jun Sakabayashi, he was able to go up to small building level with a speed of Mach 1.45. However, by the end of the tournament, his attack potency has shot up way beyond what his old advance used to be to city block level, with his speed also shooting up to Mach 11. Then with his full advance, he gets even stronger with an attack potency of multi-city block and a speed of Mach 148. Now let's go over some possible upscaling to make Ohma even stronger. This possible upscaling involves Ohma, when he has his memory back, possibly scaling to that of Niko Tokita. The reason is, when fighting against Ryan, it was directly mentioned by Ryan that Ohma is not at his peak because he's not using his techniques because he has not mastered them. Despite this, in the words of Niko, it says that the reason why Ohma hasn't mastered, or at least doesn't look like he's mastered them, is because Niko himself put a barrier, a chi block on him, to hold back his potential and his techniques, because of an incident that happened in the past. He then mentions that he's previously fought different members of the Kurai clan, and when he fought these members of the Kurai clan, none of them were as monstrous as Ryan, meaning Ryan theoretically would upscale those members that Niko has beaten. Niko then says to Ohma to wake up and regain his past memories and past experiences, and then gives him the Niko style as his own style. He then proceeds to use it on Ryan, and when he uses it on Ryan, Ryan is clearly shocked that his techniques are far better than they were a moment ago, and Ohma claims that his style is now the Niko style. This would rather imply that Ohma has inherited the role of the Niko style from Niko himself, or at the very least, has made his own style that's equal to what Niko had. Now, the reason why scaling to Niko Tokita is such an impressive feat is because of a certain feat that happened in the past with Ohma. This feat happens when he's training him on the inside, an island that's far away, and when doing so, Ohma masters Demon Blade, deflecting Niko's attack back at him. When its attack is deflected, we actually see it carves a massive portion of a forest, of which on Versus Battle Wiki has been calculated up to small town level, and on character stats and profile is calculated in the multi-city block level. However, both of these calculations are missing some extreme context. That being, we actually are given a map to see what the outside looks like, in which what we can see is it is 100 kilometers west of the inside. And not just that, we can see on the map how big it is compared to these 100 kilometers. So let's start our pixel scaling. We can say 100 kilometers is 314 pixels. The outside looks like this, and the mountain from the inside looks like this, where it's approximately 50 kilometers across. So then if we go back to the image of where Ohma's deflecting Niko's attack, we can say that the destruction compared to the 50 kilometer long mountain has a length of 9.22 kilometers and a height of 1.583 kilometers. If we assume it's as wide as it is high, then that means the amount of volume of damage destroyed was 5.78 kilometers, which is over 5.7 billion cubic meters. Now we know this attack from afterwards, we see that it was just the dust was able to blow away trees, meaning that we can say at the bare minimum it has the fragmentation of wood, and in fragmenting wood in that volume results in what is equivalent to 10.2 megatons of TNT. 10.2 megatons of TNT is very close to the third largest nuclear detonation ever recorded, being the Ivory Mike. Now the reason why this is possible scaling as opposed to proper scaling is because it's based off the ghost fragmented memory of Niko Tokita that Ohma sees, as opposed to the actual Niko Tokita who was alive and well. So it could be that Ohma has a picture perfect memory, even when it's all fragmented, and this version is just speaking of events that happened. Or it could be that Ohma is piecing things together from fragmented memories and thus getting this conclusion. So it is possible scaling, maybe not 100%. However,
Regardless if it properly scales to Ohma's attack potency, it does properly scale to his Demon Bane ability, which I'll talk more about later. Now let's quickly talk about some skill improvement that applies to Ohma. This skill improvement is about first scaling off the Ultimate Fight, which I mentioned a moment ago. The Ultimate Fight has over 200 competitors and is the largest fighting space outside of the Kengan tournament. But in the Kengan tournament, the king of the Ultimate Fight, Nyoka Okubo, decided to join and he fought against Agito, the Fang. This is the same Nyoka Okubo, who was a world-class champion at grappling, got bored at it, then did boxing, became a national at that, got bored of that, and then switched to MMA, in which he applied all three skills. So imagine being world-class at all three aspects of blows, throws, and holds, all of which while doing MMA. No wonder he was the king of the Ultimate Fight. Despite this, when facing the Fang of Metsudo, it was shown that Okubo was outmatched, with Fang being able to adapt and surpass all his moves in the blows, throws, and locks. Despite this though, Okubo still had an advantage over the Fang. That advantage was, being so skilled as he was, Okubo could switch to whatever style he wanted. Effectively, if the Fang wanted to go for a blow, he would change to a hold. If he wanted to go for a hold, he'd go for a blow, go for a lock, go for anything. He'd mix it up in a way that made his moves seem like they were ever changing. So the Fang who adapted to his moves was having a hard time dealing with Okubo. Despite the crazy ability of Okubo Noa, he actually lost in a grappling competition against that of Cosmo Imai, where the first one to get a hold won. Now it is shown that Cosmo is a better grappler than Nyoka. However, it should be noted that because Nyoka can change his moves to be ever changing, he can basically choose when to grapple and when to box. And because he's far better in all the other categories than Cosmo, you'd expect him to be able to easily beat Cosmo. However, he doesn't, and this actually depresses him as he doesn't realise exactly what Cosmo did, nor can he think of a way how to counter it. So let's look over what exactly Cosmo did. Now when facing Cosmo, Nyoka talks about what Cosmo already has going for him, first talking about his statistics and how he's a better grappler, but also he talks about how Cosmo has an ability called the Zone. Now, what is the Zone? If you look back to Cosmo's first fight with Adam Dudley, we can actually see the Zone in action, where Adam Dudley does his high stick shot and Cosmo uses the Zone, and the next thing we see is Adam Dudley beating on Cosmo, and it looks like Adam Dudley has won. However, as soon as he turns to the ref, reality looks like it's then distorted. It's then explained that, in actuality, he had never beaten Cosmo, and it's explained that the Zone, how it works is it uses a blind spot in one's consciousness to be able to deceive someone into making them seemingly disappear from reality, and then afterwards, when they're caught in the Zone, they then experience a reality that is different to what actually happened. So Adam Dudley thought he'd hit Cosmo because he was trapped in the Zone. He was seeing a reality different to him actually getting choked out. This ability is really overpowered when you think about it, because in a way, Cosmo can disappear, choke you out, and you would never be able to see it coming, and you would never be able to respond to it because your perception is stuck in a different reality. As an analogy for how the Zone works for people who are fans of Baki, imagine Baki's unconscious punch, where he punches you before your brain gets conscious in 0.5 seconds, something that was even able to drop Yujiro. Then get that punch and combined it with the hypnosis ability that Dorian has, where he uses your fighting spirit to trap your consciousness in a never-ending reality loop, which is different to what is actually happening. Get those two abilities and combine it, and that's how you get Cosmo's Zone ability. However, as the Zone relies on a setup for someone's opponent to have a certain consciousness, it is not a very reliable win con, as it quite often may not even be set up correctly, or may take too much time to be set up. This is what caused Cosmo to develop a new ability, and this new ability is how he beat Nyoka. This ability is a combination of two other characters' abilities, that being Kaneda and the ability of Akuya. First, Kaneda is able to use his foresight ability to see up to 100 moves in the future. This is able to help him predict and fight characters on a much larger level than he is, effectively foreseeing the best solution for himself. It's not perfect, as shown with Garlong Lonsawat. When he fought him, the best he could possibly get with his 100-step foresight was to last 10 moves, because anything after 10 moves and he was already lost. Now, what about Acquia? At first, Acquia seems to have a sense of precog, which even deceived that of Kaneda. However, that is not what he actually has. What Acquia has is a partner who has a perfect timing with an internal clock, and then Acquia's insane reflexes allows him to work at the same pace. This gives the illusion of foresight when actually what it is external influence giving perfect timing. So what Cosmo has done, by combining these two abilities, he has a foresight that allows him to see just a couple moves into the future, but using those couple moves into the future, he can then get perfect timing on a couple future moves his opponent will do. This will surpass the precog of Kaneda or Lakia individually, allowing Cosmo to be even better. However, the best aspect of this ability is that it completely disregards the weakness of the zone ability, as now Cosmo does not have to wait for a certain timing and a certain condition in someone's consciousness. He can force that with his sense of precog and get the timing perfect every time with his now enhanced reflexes matching his foresight. This is how Cosmo defeated Naoya Okubo, much to Okubo's frustration. So what happens when he fought Ohma with his completely overpowered moveset? Ohma actually used Cosmo as a training dummy to relearn some of his past abilities he had forgotten. In other words, he used him to drain his own stamina, so he was drained after already being exhausted. And then when he does so, he proceeds to use his own foresight and his own zone against Cosmo, being able to then choke out Cosmo, the best grappler in the city, using his own arm, effectively overpowering this completely ridiculous moveset with a simple Niko style technique. I called it simple, but this technique is far from simple. This is the part of the water redirection kata, that being the water kata's ultimate technique, Mirror of the Water. How this technique simply works is by using any part of your opponent's body, you can lock them in a hold. This can work even if you've got one of your arms broken, effectively meaning that even with one arm, Ohma should be able to choke out even the best grapplers of the series using their own body parts. Another character that Ohma should massively upscale in terms of skill is the Faceless Man. The Faceless Man has an ability to copy and mimic anyone's fighting style he sees once. Even though he says he can mimic it after seeing it once, he cannot do it at the same level as that character until after the second round, as it's later revealed. He also cannot mimic things like the removal ability of Ryan, as that is a genetic ability, not one that's derived from the technique. Despite that, he still has portions of all the 24 fighters that fought before him. An example of this would be Naoya Okubo. He has 60% of his skill, and he also has 80% of the skill of that of Galao and Gonswat. If we then add on the fact that he has already assimilated 48 other Kengan fighters while doing underground matches, you would think that he's a very skilled opponent. However, in his fight against Sen Hatsumi, in which Sen fully believed that he had copied all these different fighters and had lost his confidence, it then turns out he only lasted 26 seconds, and Sen easily beat him. This is the same Sen Hatsumi who was able to be relative to Ohma pre the Kengan tournament while Ohma was using his advance. That same advanced Ohma that Sen was relative to is vastly surpassed by base Ohma. Also, just to show that Ohma did surpass the advance that was used against Sen, we just have to look at the start of the fight with Ryan, where when Ohma was fighting Ryan at the start and he was hitting Ryan, it was surprising to everyone of just how much stronger he'd gotten, with President Yamashita straight up saying that Ohma had gotten stronger than he was before. And it wasn't just Yamashita. We have this one panel where everyone said he's strong, and by everyone I mean all of the top tier fighters such as Jun Sakabayashi, Garland Onsuwa, Julius Reinhold. We have Okubo down there, and we've got the entire Kyurei clan looking surprised as well. We even get an own page where even the likes of Agito Kano, the fag of Metsudo, was praising Ohma over his improvement and admitting that there was no way he was at this level previously, clearly showing that base Ohma had surpassed that of his previous advance. Just to give some respect to the Faceless Man for a moment, a lot of people like to say the Faceless Man isn't very skilled because it takes him 2 rounds to copy the Kengan fighters, and the first time he did it, he didn't do very well, losing to Sen in only 26 seconds. However, copying all the fighters in 2 rounds, so copying 48 different fighters that are world class in only 2 rounds, It's better than what Baki did in the maximum tournament, where Baki spent 3 rounds just to copy one fighter, that one fighter being Retsu. Speaking of Sen Hatsumi, we can actually say that a statement from the Wild Tiger, where they say that Sen Hatsumi is one of the most inconsistent fighters, implies that him overscaling someone who had the movements of 48 different Kengan fighters was in fact a feat done by Sen at his absolute worst condition, where it said that in his worst condition, even an average fighter should be able to land blows on Sen Hatsumi. However, in his peak condition, he's so good that the Wild Tiger himself does not stand a chance against Sen Hatsumi, to the point where he's compared to the Fang of Metsudo. Now, before the Fang of Metsudo fights Sen Hatsumi, he first has to fight the likes of Garland Onslaught. Garland Onslaught is the best boxer of the series, so good in fact, that when Fang faces him, he forces Fang's fighting style to be boxing. Every other style would actually do worse against what Garland Onslaught is using, essentially sealing off different fighting moves besides just boxing. It takes until a good portion into the match for the Fang to adapt and create a fighting style that can counter this sealing off of movements. Even then, it turns out that Garland Onslaught was actually holding back and not using his entire fighting range the whole time. When that happens, he very much could have beaten the Fang of Metsudo. The only reason why he doesn't is due to 3 different factors. First, the Fang, taking more damage, decided to copy Ohma's Indestructible to be able to enhance his body's durability so he could take more hits. The second one was that Garland Onslaught had an unlucky shot within the middle of the fight where he accidentally punched Fang's elbow, breaking his own fist. And then the final thing that helped him win the battle was the fact that the Fang copied Naoka Okubo's changing style technique, allowing him to momentarily surprise Garland Onslaught to change his style and then defeat him. If all 3 of these events didn't happen, the Fang of Metsudo would have lost to Garland Onslaught. Then, before facing Sen Hatsumi, the Fang gets even stronger again. He trains with the bodyguard that is closest to his level of strength and starts narrowing down all its movements, because the Fang knows so many different movements that in fact he's getting some lag from choosing the best movement. However, after this training, he no longer has any lag whatsoever, essentially making him the best version of what he could possibly be. Despite this, when facing against Sen Hatsumi, the fight starts off with Sen Hatsumi being the far more confident of the 2 fighters, casually walking up to him, and Fang, in a desperate move, even making a line to tell him not to come any closer. This line was done because the Fang realized just how much better Sen Hatsumi was at the start of the fight. That being, Sen Hatsumi could essentially dodge the Fang's moves with such little movement, people could not even notice the fact he was moving. And he even gets the first blow of the fight, despite the fact that Sen Hatsumi is an Aikido fighter, meaning he's focusing on grappling moves, not strikes. How Sen Hatsumi developed this technique was actually sparring against Ohma, in which when sparring against him, he would constantly make his dodges smaller and smaller as Ohma would slowly get faster and faster, until at the very end, it looked like a full-speed Ohma's attacks was in fact phasing right through him. This is actually the same technique Baki was using against the likes of Pickle in the Baki anime, in which Baki was making it look like Pickle passed right through him. Although the difference here is obviously that Sen Hatsumi was doing it to the great Fang of Metsudo, not Pickle. Of course, the Fang of Metsudo still beat Sen Hatsumi because he himself had evolved during the fight against Sen Hatsumi. The first ability he had developed was that of the 1-inch punch at any range, or in other words, any blow that the Fang of Metsudo does, no matter the range, was always considered a knockout blow, essentially meaning that he no longer had any openings whatsoever, as any contact with the Fang of Metsudo meant a possible knockout. The other ability he had got was actually one he got from Gensai Kuroki, and that being Pre-Initiative. Pre-Initiative is better than Cosmo Imai's Foresight, being an ability that allows you to instantly see into the future and counteract someone's moves before they can even think. This ability is in fact so good, it is considered the ultimate power that the Fang of Metsudo has, even better than being able to do a knockout blow at any range. In fact, this is so good, it is better than Cosmo Imai's Foresight ability, where he combined 2 different Foresight abilities into one. The reason why it's so good is when Gensai Kuroki used it in one of his previous fights, he was able to predict and start beating down on someone who was so fast that Gensai himself couldn't even see him. In fact, Gensai's foresight ability is so good that even characters with techniques that would manipulate one's perception, such as Setsuna Kiryu with the blink ability to make it so that he disappears in someone's perception, are completely useless against Gensai's foresight. This blink ability to disappear from someone's perception is very similar to an ability Kid Goku used in the 22nd World Martial Art Tournament against Krillin to disappear from Krillin's view, as well as a repeat of the same move that was used against Hit in the Dragon Ball Super anime. Despite this amazing level of foresight that Gensai Kuroki has, as well as his other skills, which I haven't even talked about in this video so far, when fighting against Ohma was able to catch him off guard a couple times in their fight, and was even able to briefly force him backwards. This showing that Ohma was at such a level that he was able to compete against someone at the massive skill level of Gensai Kuroki with an amazing foresight ability such as his own. This is even more impressive when you consider that Gensai Kurogi himself states that he wished he had fought Ohma when Ohma was in a peak condition and not in a near-death condition, as he's been getting more and more injured throughout the entire Kengan tournament, rather implying that they would have been far more competitive if Ohma was healthy. Now, if we want to do more of a cross-scale analysis for how skilled Ohma would be as opposed to inverse scaling, we can then look at something like the most common ways to scale someone's skill. For example, being the number of years of experience they scale to, the number of martial arts they scale to, or perhaps the number of people they can fight at once. Of course, Ohma and some other characters in Kengan Ashura have a really good example to show exactly how much they scale to. Now, for our example, we'll be using the scaling of the Kurai clan. The Kurai clan is able to essentially have the best genetics formed by inbreeding globally with the best martial artists in the world for 1,300 years straight. And this applies to every single member of the Kurai clan. And it's not just that, the Kurai clan also has all the martial arts that are around in the eastern and western sides of the world, or at least the very best ones that they then implement into their own style, essentially having the combination of globally 1,300 years worth of martial art experience. That then explains the years of experience as well as the number of martial arts that the Kurai clan members on average should all scale to. Now, for the number of people that they can fight, we can look still at the Kurai clan at a member of the Kurai clan who Ohma had fought. Not Ryan, but the second strongest Kala Kurai. Kala Kurai is the second strongest of the Kurai clan, having an 85% release rate compared to everyone else being 80% or lower, and only being surpassed by Ryan's 100%. And not just that, she fought Ohma before the Kengan tournament, having a 50-50 encounter. Neither one of them used any particular technique, nor did either one of them use their transformation states. However, what's interesting about Kala Kurai is she's so strong that an entire room full of Kurai clan members would stand absolutely no chance against Kala Kurai, very much showing that she surpasses an entire groups of members with 1,300 years of experience of every martial art over the past 1,300 years. Oh, also as well, when Ohma sleeps, he actually dreams and trains fighting against any person he's ever seen before, some of them being people he's only seen fight once. And in doing so, it means that Ohma has fought over 40,000 matches literally in his sleep, so he can train against people just by sleeping. Earlier on in the video, I had mentioned the full list of the Niko style techniques, which are too long to be seen. And throughout this video, I've mentioned some techniques here and there and explained the most simple ones. However, I've not explained many of the more complex ones and more notable ones that have been used. I won't explain all of them, I'll just explain the more notable ones. The first one of these abilities is Flash Fire. The Flash Fire is an ability that uses flicker movement to make it look like he's creating after images to confuse his opponent. Next is Flashing Steel. Flashing Steel is a combination move using both the indestructible sides of the Adamantine style as well as the Raging Fire from the Fire style. This allows it to be a flashy attack that happens really fast and is a counter move best used when someone's trying to attacking. This works very well, especially since it has three different forms: the Blast, the Smash, and the Pierce. Next up is the Redirection Carter's Chi Blockage. Chi Blockage is an ability that is used to originally destroy the nervous systems of the target. However, by using it precisely, Ohma is able to stop his own and Setsuna's heart problems, essentially fixing internal damage as well as being able to destroy it. Next up is the Jellyfish Hold, or Jellyfish Clutch as it's sometimes called. The jellyfish clutch is essentially a clothesline where upon contact you then turn it into a headlock, and you do so with such force that it is designed to snap the opponent's neck. Next up is the water dragon's vein, a hold position move that would easily knock someone out in only 7 seconds. However, if it's used to its full capacity, it would straight up snap the opponent's spine. Now another redirection move is the flowing edge. The flowing edge is used to essentially deflect projectiles or anything that has a high piercing chance to make it less likely it would ever hit Ohma. Next is the bind of pieces, which is able to essentially get someone in an evolving armbar where they have one leg in front of the arm and one behind the head. This allows them to essentially make it very easy to snap someone's arm given the right conditions. The next move is Phantom Pace. Phantom Pace is a move where the user quickly sidesteps the attack before making the opponent think that their attack phased right through them. Next is Raging Fire, a technique that is used to accelerate Ohma's body to immeasurable speeds. This next is the ultimate move of the Flame Kata, the Earth Shrinking. The Earth Shrinking is a move that gives the illusion of Ohma going backwards, while instead throwing him forward to get into range. This move was so effective it even worked on Gensai Kuroki. Finally, we're getting to the ultimate move I said I would explain earlier on in the video, and that being Demon Bane. Demon Bane is a move that uses all 4 elements of the Niko style: the Redirection Kata, the Water Kata, the Flame Kata, and the Adamantine Kata. It does so to redirect the flow of power, flow it through the body, add his own power, and then direct it right back to the enemy. Such a move can be used even when someone is completely off balance, such as Ohma, and even when Wakatsuki, the Wild Tiger, was expecting it. However, because it's completely formless and requires no such setup to be used, just a perfect combination of all the styles to be mastered, it will instantly redirect all that power back at the opponent. Such a move is so unpredictable that even the great Wakatsuki had no chance of going against it. The moment you don't realise Demon Bane's being used is the moment you've lost. Now of course this is far from a large list of the Niko style, this is just the ones that Ohma more commonly is used and has used, at least within the bounds of Kengan Ashura. And that will conclude the scaling for Ohma within Kengan Ashura, or at least the scaling I would like to share in this video. As things go into Kengan Omega, characters get way stronger than they do at the moment, with characters being so strong that they're compared to terraforming all of New Zealand, as well as characters could shake entire mountains with single attacks. Kengan Omega is definitely a step up. With this scaling done, and with the many comparisons in this video I've made to Baki, including within the thumbnail, it makes you wonder just who would win between Baki and Ohma, something that we will be seeing soon on Netflix on the 6th of June. And who knows, if this video does really well, I might do what if videos like what if Baki was in the Kengan Ashura Annihilation tournament, or maybe if Ohma was in the Baki Maximum tournament, see what happens. Thank you all for watching this video. Check out my other videos I've got on my channel, such as my How Strong is Garu video and How Strong are Boros videos. They are equally as long as detailed as this video. If you look in the description of this video, you'll find my Discord, as well as you'll find a list of all the other different power scaling channels that have either helped me or I find very interesting, such as Captain Forest and Coron O'Keefe. Thank you all for watching, have a good day.